Hey Reddit, I've been sitting on this story for a while, debating whether or not to share it. It's the kind of thing that feels like it belongs in a bad Netflix thriller, but unfortunately, it's my life. I'm posting this from a throwaway because, well, you'll see why. My name's Ethan Carter, and up until last year, I thought I had it all. A great job in tech sales, a close-knit group of friends, and a wife who I genuinely believed was my soulmate. Her name is Jessica Taylor, and we met at a bar in Austin 7 years ago. She was witty, ambitious, and had this magnetic energy that made it impossible not to be drawn to her. We got married 3 years later in a small, intimate ceremony at a lakeside venue. It felt perfect, until it wasn't. It all started when Jessica's work as a marketing director required her to travel more. She'd always been career-driven, so I didn't mind holding down the fort while she jetted off to conferences in San Francisco, New York, and Chicago. I missed her, sure, but I trusted her. She'd call every night, send pictures from fancy hotel lounges, and talk about how exhausting the business dinners were. She was supposed to be gone for 4 days. On the third night, she called me sounding different, distracted, like she was in a hurry. When I asked what was wrong, she brushed it off as just being tired, but something felt off. Call it gut instinct or paranoia, but that weird feeling wouldn't let go. About 2 weeks after she got back, I was tidying up our shared home office when I noticed her old iPad sitting in the drawer. Jessica was always glued to her phone, and I figured she hadn't used the iPad in ages. On a whim, I booted it up. There it was, a string of messages on Facebook Messenger. The name Brandon Hayes stood out immediately. He wasn't saved in her contacts, but there were dozens of messages. My stomach turned as I scrolled up. Inside jokes, late-night messages, pictures. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She was calling him B and talking about how much she missed him. He was sending selfies from what looked like a cabin in the mountains. Cabin I didn't recognize. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I waited until she was making coffee and placed the iPad on the counter, open to the messages. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice trembling but firm. Jessica's face went pale. For a split second, she looked like she might lie, like she was calculating her way out. But then she just sighed and muttered, "It's not what you think." It was exactly what I thought. The twist I didn't see coming. As she stumbled through some half-hearted excuses about just talking and needing an emotional outlet, I realized I wasn't mad. I was furious. I demanded to know who Brandon was and how long it had been going on. That's when she dropped the first bombshell. Brandon's my ex-fiancé. Apparently, before she met me, she'd been engaged to this guy but broke it off when he supposedly moved away for work. She claimed she hadn't spoken to him in years, until she ran into him at a conference in Denver. I was reeling. This wasn't just a fling or some random guy from her past. It was him, someone she'd clearly never gotten over. The phone call that changed everything. After she left to give me space, I sat there drowning in anger and confusion, but something kept nagging at me. Why hadn't she ever mentioned him before? I did what any suspicious person would do. I called a friend of mine who works in IT security. He owed me a favor from way back. I asked him if he could track down anything on Brandon Hayes. An hour later, he called me back, sounding weirdly serious. "Ethan, you need to sit down." Turns out, Brandon Hayes wasn't her ex-fiancé. He was never engaged to Jessica. In fact, he wasn't even using his real name. The real Brandon Hayes was a guy from Colorado who died in a hiking accident 2 years ago. The man she was messaging was using his identity. The dark truth. Panicked, I went back through her messages, reading more carefully. In between the flirty texts were strange references, mentions of fixing things, making up for lost time, and being together forever. I called Jessica immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling again and again, but nothing. She was gone. The final revelation. A week later, the police knocked on my door. They found Jessica's car abandoned near a remote hiking trail in Colorado. The same trail where the real Brandon Hayes had died. Her suitcase was missing, but inside the car, they found her phone wiped clean. No messages, no photos, no digital trace. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. It's been 6 months now. No updates. No sightings. Nothing. Every so often, I get a postcard in the mail with no return address. Just a cryptic line. I'm still fixing things. Wait for me. I don't know who she really was. I don't know if she's alive, or if she ever really loved me. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. And I have no idea what she's coming back to fix. Hey Reddit. I've been carrying this weight for a while, unsure if I should share it. Writing it down feels like admitting it really happened. Some nights, I can't sleep, haunted by memories that feel like someone else's nightmare. But it's my reality. Our perfect beginning. My name is Ethan Carter, and for the longest time I thought I had it all. A career I was proud of, a tight circle of friends, and most importantly Jessica Taylor, the woman I loved with every piece of my soul. We met at a lively bar in Austin during one of those nights where you expect nothing and life surprises you. She wore this dark green dress that hugged her in all the right ways, her brown hair tumbling over her shoulders like she was made for movie screens. But it was her laugh that got me. Bold, uninhibited, like she wasn't afraid of the world. She was everything I wasn't. Adventurous, spontaneous, fearless. We fell fast and hard. I proposed on a foggy autumn morning at a cabin in Vermont. I remember how her eyes shimmered with tears when she said yes, her voice shaking like she couldn't believe we'd found each other. She used to say, "You're my forever, Ethan. No matter what." God, I was such a fool. The beginning of the lies. 3 years into our marriage, her career took off. Marketing director for a national firm, she was killing it. I was proud, so damn proud. I didn't even mind when her job meant more trips out of town. San Francisco, New York, Denver. She was doing what she loved, and I trusted her completely. But looking back, there were cracks I didn't want to see. She started coming home tired, distant, like she'd left part of herself wherever she'd been. "Work's just exhausting," she'd say, offering me a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself it was normal. Stress, deadlines, life. But some nights, I'd wake up and find her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. I'd ask if she was okay, and she'd always say, "Just thinking about the future." I thought she meant our future. The discovery. One night, after she came back from a last-minute work retreat in Denver, I was tidying up the office when I saw her old iPad gathering dust in a drawer. We'd stopped using it when we upgraded our phones, but something made me turn it on. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But when I opened the Messenger app, there he was, Brandon Hayes. The chat was still open. My hands went cold as I started scrolling. "I can't wait to see you again. Wish I could be there now. Like last time. It's always been you." Photos. The kind you don't send someone unless they mean everything to you. She looked happy. So happy. Happier than I'd seen her in years. Couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. This was my Jessica, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. Sharing her heart with a man I'd never even heard of. The confrontation. The next morning, I waited until she was making coffee. I placed the iPad on the counter, the messages glaring up at her like a silent accusation. "Who the hell is Brandon Hayes?" I demanded, my voice trembling, her face drained of color. For a moment, I thought she might faint, but instead, she laughed. Not out of amusement. Out of nervous disbelief, like she couldn't believe she'd been caught. "It's not what you think," she whispered. But it was exactly what I thought. She stammered out a story about how Brandon was her ex-fiancé, someone she'd been engaged to before she met me, but supposedly cut ties with when he moved away. But that wasn't the worst part. She admitted they'd reconnected at a marketing conference in Denver by accident. "It just happened," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't plan it, Ethan." "How long?" I asked. Her lip trembled. "Almost a year. A year. An entire year of lies. Of her coming home to me, pretending I was her whole world when she was sharing her heart, and God knows what else, with him." The dark twist. I was done. Or at least I thought I was, until a nagging voice in my head wouldn't shut up. Why hadn't she ever mentioned this ex-fiancé before? Why did she seem almost scared when I pushed for more details? Desperate for answers, I reached out to my old friend, Adam, a cybersecurity expert. I asked if he could dig into Brandon Hayes. An hour later, Adam called back. His voice was cold and urgent. Ethan, you need to listen carefully. Brandon Hayes wasn't her ex-fiancé. In fact, he was dead. He died 2 years ago in a hiking accident in Colorado, the exact same remote area where she'd last traveled for work. The man she'd been messaging was using his identity. But why? The vanishing act. Panicked, I called Jessica, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I never saw her again. A week later, the police found her car abandoned near the trail where the real Brandon Hayes had died. Her phone was found inside, wiped clean, no messages, no photos, nothing. They ruled it a missing person case. But she was gone. The letters. It's been 6 months. Some nights, I wake up in a cold sweat, expecting to find her sitting by the window again, staring out into the dark. And then, the letters started. No return address. Just postcards with cryptic messages. I'm still fixing things. Wait for me. It's not over yet. Sometimes I wonder if she's out there watching, waiting. Sometimes I wonder, did I ever really know her at all? After Jessica disappeared, my life became a surreal, hollow echo of what it once was. Days bled into nights and nights stretched into weeks. I couldn't focus at work. Every email notification made my heart jump. Every knock on my front door made my stomach twist with dread and hope. Hope that she'd be there, explaining everything. But she never was. I started seeing a therapist, though I didn't tell him the full story. How could I explain the bizarre disappearance of my wife, her connection to a dead man, and the cryptic postcards that kept arriving every few weeks? He would have thought I was insane. Sometimes I thought I was. I moved out of our house. Too many memories, too many shadows. But no matter where I went, she followed me. In my thoughts, in my dreams, and worst of all, in reality. The stranger at the coffee shop. 3 months after her disappearance, I was sitting at a coffee shop in downtown Austin, staring blankly at my laptop, pretending to work. It was one of those dreary, rainy afternoons that mirrored how I felt inside. I was half listening to the soft hum of conversation around me when I heard her laugh. Jessica's laugh. I froze, my pulse thundering in my ears. It was impossible, it had to be my mind playing tricks on me. But when I turned around, I saw her. She was sitting in a corner booth, her head thrown back in laughter, looking just like she used to, alive, radiant, real. But then I saw him. The man sitting across from her, holding her hand, was Brandon Hayes. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My breath hitched, and for a second, I thought I might pass out. This couldn't be real. Brandon was dead. But there they were, sharing an intimate moment like they hadn't left a trail of devastation behind them. The confrontation that never happened. I should have stormed over, demanded answers, called the police. Something. But I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the ground as a wave of nausea hit me. What if she saw me? What if she didn't care? I watched, helpless, as they finished their drinks. She leaned in, whispered something in his ear, and they both laughed. That same warm, familiar laugh that used to belong to me. When they got up to leave, I followed them from a distance. I was shaking so badly I could barely walk straight. They strolled down the street like any normal couple in love, unaware of the storm raging inside me. Then she stopped. For one agonizing moment, Jessica turned around. Our eyes met. She saw me. Her expression didn't change. No shock, no guilt, no recognition. She stared through me, like I was just another face in the crowd. Then she turned back to him, took his hand, and disappeared into the bustling city. The game begins. I stumbled back to my apartment in a daze. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Was she playing some twisted game? Was she under his control? Or had she chosen this life willingly? The next day, another postcard arrived. You weren't supposed to see that. Be patient. I'm almost done. That's when I realized. She wanted me to see her. The chase. I became obsessed after that. I stopped going to work, stopped seeing friends. I pored over every photo, every message I could recover. I followed any clue, no matter how small, tracking hotel bookings, conference records, anything tied to Jessica or Brandon Hayes. And I found something. There was no Brandon Hayes. Not anymore. His name kept popping up in strange places, but always under different aliases. He was a ghost. And Jessica, she was helping him. I tracked them to Flagstaff, Arizona. They checked into a remote cabin under new names. It took me a week, but I finally found the cabin. A secluded, eerie place buried deep in the woods. I waited, watching from the shadows, fueled by equal parts rage and desperation. I had to know why. Why she left, why she lied, why she destroyed us. The final confrontation. On the third night, I couldn't wait any longer. The lights inside the cabin were dim. I crept closer, heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Through the window, I saw them sitting by the fireplace, her head resting on his shoulder, like she was finally at peace. I stepped onto the porch, ready to kick the door in, when I noticed something odd. The cabin door was already open. Blood. A dark trail of blood led from the porch into the cabin. My breath hitched as I followed the crimson path, stepping into the cold, silent house. The fire was still burning. 2 coffee cups sat on the table, but they were gone. I turned slowly, heart in my throat, and that's when I saw it. A single postcard pinned to the wall with a bloody knife. You were never supposed to find us, Ethan, but now it's too late. Now, it's been 2 months since that night. The police found no bodies, no trace of Jessica or the man she was with, no fingerprints, no explanation, but the postcards haven't stopped. The latest one arrived just yesterday. You're almost ready. See you soon. I don't know what's coming, but I know it's not over. After that last postcard, I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. Whatever game Jessica was playing, I was now a part of it, whether I liked it or not. And if there was one thing I'd learned by now, it was that she was always 3 steps ahead. I quit my job, sold everything I owned, and went off the grid. No phone, no credit cards, nothing that could be tracked. I lived out of a battered old Jeep, constantly moving, always looking over my shoulder. But no matter how far I ran, the postcards kept coming. The cryptic clues. Each postcard was a twisted breadcrumb, leading me deeper into a mystery I couldn't escape. They came from random cities across the U.S., Portland, Chicago, Miami, but they weren't just taunts. They were messages. Trust no one. Keep moving. Remember what you promised. But the worst one came last month. It was blank. Except for one phrase. The cabin. Come home. The return. I knew exactly which cabin she meant. The one where it all started. The remote Colorado cabin where Brandon Hayes had supposedly died, where Jessica vanished, and where I last saw them alive. I drove through the night, memories clawing at me with every mile. I couldn't decide if I was chasing her, or if she was still leading me. By the time I reached the cabin, the air was sharp and cold. Everything looked the same, except the front door was wide open. The final revelation. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my hand. The familiar smell of pine and ash hit me like a slap. The fireplace was dark, the room eerily still. On the table was an old cassette player, the kind you haven't seen in decades. Taped to it was another postcard. Press play. My hands shook as I hit the button. For a moment, there was only static. Then her voice. Ethan. I staggered back like I'd been punched in the gut. It was her. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I never wanted you to find out. But you wouldn't let it go. Her voice cracked, like she was holding back tears. We were supposed to disappear, start over. But you kept chasing us. Static filled the room. Then her voice returned. Cold, calculated, and final. I needed you to follow me, to remember, to wake up. The tape clicked off. My breath hitched. What did she mean, wake up? The trap. Suddenly, the cabin's radio crackled to life. A low, distorted voice filled the room. Target confirmed. Extraction team inbound. Before I could react, the walls erupted with red laser sights piercing through the windows. I dove behind the table, adrenaline roaring in my veins. I grabbed the cassette player and sprinted toward the back door, crashing through the woods like a hunted animal. They were coming. The truth revealed. Hours later, I found shelter deep in the forest, trembling from exhaustion and terror. My mind raced with fragments of memories I couldn't piece together. Jessica's words echoed in my head. You were never supposed to remember. Wake up. Then it hit me, I'd been running from the wrong enemy. Jessica wasn't my betrayer. She was my handler. The pieces finally fit. The fake identities, the secret messages, the endless chase. We were spies. Deep cover operatives caught in a mission gone horribly wrong. And Brandon Hayes? He wasn't her lover. He was my partner. The final twist. I don't know what mission we were on, or what I forgot, but someone out there wanted me erased, and Jessica's betrayal had been a carefully crafted cover story, designed to keep me running, keep me alive. As I sit here in the dark, waiting for the next move, I realize one thing. I'm not chasing her anymore. She's been saving me from the beginning. The radio crackles one last time. Mission reset. Initiate recovery. The last postcard sits in my lap. Its message burned into my memory. I'll find you when it's safe. Trust me. One last time. It's not over. It was never over that I sat in that dark forest clearing, drenched in sweat and breathing in sharp, cold air. My mind was reeling, trying to grasp what was real and what was fabricated. Who was I? Was I ever Ethan Carter, a tech salesman with a quiet life and a loving wife? Or was that identity nothing more than an elaborate cover, carefully constructed to hide something far more dangerous? The last 6 months, the postcards, the disappearances, the betrayals, it all clicked into place. I had been living in a manufactured reality, designed to keep me running, to keep me sharp. And Jessica, she never betrayed me. She saved me. The final message. I stared at the last postcard again, feeling its weight like a loaded gun in my hand. This message was burned into my mind. Trust me. One last time. The radio crackled in my hand. The same distorted voice from before. Mission reset. Initiate recovery. But this time I didn't run. I reached into my jacket, feeling the cold steel of the keycard I'd taken from the cabin. Something I hadn't even realized I'd grabbed in my escape. It was marked with a symbol I didn't recognize. A black circle split by a white line. Suddenly, headlights pierced through the trees. A dark SUV rolled to a stop a few yards away, engine humming like a predator waiting to strike. The passenger door opened. Jessica stepped out, alive, her expression unreadable but her eyes soft, familiar. She walked toward me slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. It's over, she whispered. You remember now, don't you? I couldn't move. My heart ached with everything I'd lost. The life I thought I had, the love I thought she'd stolen from me. But now, standing there in the cold moonlight, I realized the truth. I never lost her. She'd been fighting for me the whole time. The truth unveiled. Before I could speak, the back door of the SUV opened, and Brandon Hayes stepped out very much alive. He wasn't a threat. He was my handler. We had to burn your old life, he said grimly. They were getting too close. We couldn't risk you remembering until it was safe. I was still piecing it together, but I understood enough. Whoever they were running from, they hadn't stopped hunting us. You were never Ethan Carter, Jessica whispered. That life was just a cover. You're someone else entirely. I stared into her eyes, feeling something stir deep within me. A memory long buried. A spark of recognition. I knew her. I always had. The decision. The air was cold and still. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for my next move. I could walk away, forget everything, disappear like I was supposed to, let my past dissolve into the shadows. Or, I could trust her. One last time. I took a slow, deliberate step toward Jessica. Her lips parted, her breath hitching like she thought I might run again. What happens now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Her fingers brushed mine, grounding me in a way I couldn't explain. We finish what we started. Behind her, the SUV's engine rumbled like a waiting beast. The mission wasn't over, it was just beginning. I climbed into the SUV without looking back. As the vehicle disappeared into the dark, the forest swallowed the last remnants of the life I thought I knew. In the rearview mirror, Jessica met my gaze. There was no pretense, no mask, just raw, unspoken truth between us. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The end. Or maybe, the beginning.